Hello everybody, Juan aka JC here, and one thing I realized while I was working on the different videos I've been publishing so far is that I never really took just some time to talk about games, me growing up with games, some of my favorite games. So instead of just doing a top 5 Juan's favorite games, I figured I want to start a bit of a series that will grow over time with some of my favorite games, because it really depends on how I'm feeling, what kind of genre I want to play. So this is volume 1 of my favorite games of all time. Now I do want to start first with Left 4 Dead. Now Left 4 Dead 1, not 2, although I do enjoy both games and have played them extensively. I've played over 500 hours, primarily the PC version. Now the reason that I love Left 4 Dead so much is that it got to show a different side of gaming for me, because up until that point for me, gaming was either a single player experience or an online competitive experience. But Left 4 Dead really gave me an opportunity to just hang out with my friends and try to survive and do 4-player online co-op. And even when you play Versus, which is 4-on-4, 4 people that play as the humans and 4 that play as the infected, you still get that cooperative nature of the game. You got to strategize if you're the infected. And there are so many things that I love about this so much. I actually got to bond a lot better with a lot of my close friends that aren't here in Puerto Rico, which is where I live. They're in different places in Canada, Boston, etc. So this was our one location where we could just really hang out. We got a little bit competitive, trying to see, why did I die here? But then you survived. So next time we got to stick together. You have to be able to strategize. And although the second game gave me more, I'm not necessarily sure that was for the better. I like the simplistic nature of the first one a lot more. I didn't play that much of the second one. I think sometimes less is more, and that's exactly what I thought about Left 4 Dead. Now up next we have a game that I love so much, and it is very near and dear to my heart, and that is Age of Empires 2: The Age of Kings and the Conquerors expansion. You're looking at some footage from the HD re-release on Steam. Now this game, it's almost a bit of a journey. I first got this when I traveled to Chicago, Illinois, well over 12, 15 years ago, whenever it was, and I saw this. And up until this point, I had never played an RTS game, let alone a game online of this kind of nature. And once I got to see it, the different classes, this game actually got me through history class. There was one teacher that kept asking me about the Vikings and Joan of Arc, and I kept answering things. And that's because this game does have a campaign where you can learn about this history, you can learn about the different classes, how long these civilizations lasted, and I love that so much about the game. Plus you had the online culture, the online audience, and Microsoft Zone made that rest in peace. Obviously it's way easier to play now with Steam Workshop with levels, because it wasn't just about playing the campaign or creating your own. You could go online and play game modes that were basically created by people. So like PTO, you got to protect the one. You're playing online with about 8 players, and then you got to survive, and then you got to level up your character by killing CPU and killing the other players and hopefully surviving. There was just so much variety. And you know what game is good? When expansions still continue to come out. We got Age of Empires 3, which honestly I was not a huge fan of, and we got Age of Mythology. Now Age of Empires 1, I did appreciate that game a lot. I actually played Age of Empires 1 after I played Age of Empires 2, similar with Final Fantasy 7. I played Final Fantasy 8 first, so maybe I can talk about that in some future video if everybody's interested. But Age of Empires 2, it is such a great classic game. When a game continues getting so much support after it came out in, I believe, 1997, 1999, you know that game did something incredible to shape games to the way they are today. Up next, we have a game that came out for the PlayStation 1, and this is Star Ocean: The Second Story. Now, notice how it does say the second story in the title. That's because it's a sequel to a game that never came out in the US called Star Ocean for the Super Nintendo. Now, eventually we did get the first departure and second evolution for PSP. Now, those haven't come out on other consoles other than the PSP. People will sometimes play it through emulation. There are rumors about these games being eventually released on the PS4. I really hope that happens. Now, we did get till the end of time and other Star Ocean games since the PS1 game. I was honestly not a fan of them, so why do I like this game so much? Basically, it is a universe. You get so many hours. There's variety in this game compared to other games that come out today, like Mass Effects, like just so many games. You can craft in this game. You can make your own items. You can make your own food. You can level up specific things. You can choose which characters are integrated into your story. There are characters in the game that you never even knew they could be in your party, and you could be okay with that. There are hidden dungeons that are even far more difficult than the actual final dungeon in the game. Just so many good things. I love the sprite-based 2D gameplay. You know, this was around the time where everything was polygons. Polygons were in the PS1. We gotta worry about them 3D graphics. But Star Ocean was still faithful to its original game on the Super Nintendo, and it made it that much better. Plus, add to that an outstanding original soundtrack, great characters, and the fighting style is so unique. It wasn't turn-based like the Final Fantasy games. This was active time battles where you can move around in the field once you engage in random encounters, and then you can level up different abilities the more you use them. So you actually have an incentive to figure out the different strategies. You play as 4 different characters, but then you can swap out. So 3 of them will be temporarily controlled by CPU as you control your primary character, but you can assign different fighting styles to the CPU, so you know that they can be more passive and not spend so much MP, or they can be aggressive, go all out if you're in a boss battle. Now, even years later, we got games like Final Fantasy XII that made use of systems like this, but keep in mind we're talking about the PS1. This is such an awesome game that can give you hours upon hours of gameplay. You definitely got to give this game a try. Next up, we have a game that came out for many different consoles, and that is Tony Hawk's Underground. Now, if you're a fan of the Tony Hawk franchise, odds are you probably prefer Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 or 3, but this game was special to me for so many different ways, particularly the PlayStation 2 version because it had online play. This was around the time where, yeah, there were online games for the PS2, but they were very much drop in, drop out, play, match, and finish. But because this had free skate and you can plug in your USB keyboard to chat online with different people, you could just hang out. I made a lot of friends playing Tony Hawk's Underground. Eventually, I joined clans, which admittedly, I was probably the worst player in the clans, but hey, they accepted me. I couldn't complain. I was pretty happy about that. Like previous entries in the series, this game featured a great soundtrack from different artists, particularly from maybe the punk, the ska, and the rock genres. And I love that so much. You know, there are so many games that have original soundtracks, but games like Tony Hawk's Underground really presented to me artists and bands that I didn't even know existed because, well, I just wasn't exposed to them at the time. Plus, something else that was pretty great was that this took the gameplay that we all knew and loved, but you can then get off the skateboard and walk around. Now, these games were always rough around the edges when it came to graphics and animation. They were never the prettiest game. Even back then, they looked outdated by video game standards. But there was something so nice, something that you really loved about these games, that you came to love them and appreciate them for what they were. Plus, it actually had a story mode worth playing. Now, in the time where extreme sports games were just pretty much you play, you level up, you get your high scores, or you play multiplayer. No, this game actually had a story mode where you progressed with your custom skater. You can make him look as normal or as outrageous as you wanted to make him look, and you had a great time. And ultimately, this game came out at a really good time for me where I just wasn't talking to a lot of people on a personal level. So going online, hanging out with different people, making friends, being able to hang out, do ridiculous stuff in a game, being able to laugh for a little while, solidified Tony Hawk's Underground is a game that I still play to this day. By the way, you've been watching some footage from the Xbox version, but once again, the PS2 version was the favorite one for me. Now, last and certainly not least is a game that really changed the way that I looked at video games forever, and that is Final Fantasy Tactics for the PS1. This has come out on iOS and Android and PSP, so many different versions, but my favorite, because it's the one that I grew up playing, was the PS1 version. Final Fantasy Tactics showed me that you can mix great deep gameplay with a rich, engaging story about family, about death, about surviving, about being able to escape and then come back stronger and better than ever. You mix in a great soundtrack that makes you feel exactly how the character feels, that even though there's no voiceover in this game, the proper mixture of the ambience, of the characters, of the drawings, of the music, lets you know exactly how each and every character is feeling. Now later on, for the PSP re-release, they actually did integrate voiceover and cutscenes. Personally, I thought that was fine, although the PSP version unfortunately suffered from a lot of slowdowns, so I still recommend that you play the PS1 version even if the translation was a little bit rough around the edges, but it's the one that I grew up playing, and honestly, I guess if you change something after you already played it growing up, chances are you're gonna feel a little bit weird doing things like that. One of the benefits this game has is that because it is sprite-based, it really stood the test of time graphically, as opposed to, as what I mentioned earlier, so many games focused on the 3D graphics that if you go back and play them, they don't look as pretty, but there's something about the way the characters look. And for the record, yes, I know that this is very similar to TeknoAXE Ogre in that series, which I've never played to this day, so somebody's probably yelling at me that I should play them, and yes, so maybe that's something that I should play eventually on the channel if you think that I should, and I'll strongly consider that. And just in case you never played the game before, yes, this is a tactics turn-based game, so this is not like Final Fantasy where it's turn-based where you hit attack and then you attack, and this is not like Star Ocean where it's an active battle system where you can walk around. This is a grid-based battle system where you have to strategically walk around and you move around differently based on the different classes that you have. So if you have a ninja, obviously they can move farther and jump higher. There are magic-based classes, and you have to consider your field. So if there's water, you definitely don't want to suffer from a lightning attack while you're standing on water. You can float. Like Star Ocean, there are different dungeons that are secret. You can even unlock Final Fantasy VII's Cloud Strife in the game, starting at level 1, which really sucks because you get them way later in the game, and you level up each character based on their actions, so it's not like you level up your entire party. But this game is so damn good that I've beaten it on the PS1 a couple of times. I've beaten it on the PSP. I have the PS1 version, I have the PlayStation Store PS1 version, I have the physical version of the PSP version, and I have the digital version of the PSP version. Do I have too many versions of this one game? Probably, but it's one of my favorite games of all time, possibly tied with Star Ocean. It all really depends. If I had a cup of coffee in the morning, maybe one will triumph over the other. So that has been it for my favorite games of all time, Volume 1. I definitely like to know some of your favorite games. It doesn't have to be a top 5, just some of the games that make sure you smile when you're not having that great of a day. If you'd like me to play any of these games, whether it be a one-time video or even a playthrough, even if it takes a couple of 20 years or so, definitely let me know in the comments, as well as suggestions for future videos. If there's anything else you'd like to know about me, you can suggest a way, maybe I do a video about it, or you can also interact with me on Twitter, EpicJC. That's where I also do a lot of polls related to how I am shaping this channel up. So thank you so much for supporting me. Don't forget to upvote, share, and spread the love about everything that it is I'm doing here on EpicJC. So until next time, thank you for watching, and never forget that the epic journey continues.